Sorry. So I've started the recording. Good morning. And so as always, I'm leaving everybody muted. You can unmute yourself. We just ask that you raise your hand prior to unmuting yourself so that we can kind of we'll have people talking over each other. You always have the option to put a comment into the chat. And we can respond to that. I do see a comment in there right now from Don, so I'll get to that in just a minute. So as far as, again, so today during the meeting, we are going to talk about just a quick recap of yesterday. Chelsea will give an ESSERF reporting overview, and then Beth and Paige will provide some information about the gear funding for student devices. So as far as yesterday, we went over. We saw the document that I am working on as far as providing coding availability for the ESSERF funds. I do want to point out that what you saw yesterday isn't the level of detail that you're going to be providing in the actual application. The actual application will be will have quite a bit less lines than that, and will be much simpler than that. But what I'm trying in doing this, we are trying to ensure that as you think about the projects that you're doing, thinking about how those need to be coded out in your handbook, and then how are we going to, when we do our reporting back to the feds, ensure that we're reporting back and being able to report back in the categories that they've provided, on how money can be spent. So again, there's about, I think there's 14 categories, and so what I asked of people yesterday, and actually, so what I'll do is I will share that document again real quickly. And let me pull off my, is it showing the document, Paula? Okay. So I split the funding into these 14 different categories. And so especially the 4 that are highlighted, I've gotten some good feedback as to how people think they would spend money under those categories. So as much feedback as you can provide as to how you might spend money under those categories would be helpful. And then we will provide this as yet some more, as another resource for you as you're filling out your applications. So as much feedback as you can provide to me as to how you might spend the money would be as the more feedback I can get, the more guidance that we can provide back to the school units. And so I do have some items now put under some of these categories that are highlighted in yellow, and then I do have a number of different items under the ones that aren't highlighted already. So that was what I wanted to recap. And Chelsea, is Chelsea on?
I am, Tyler.
Okay, so I will turn it over to you as soon as I can figure out how to unshare my screen. It's not acting. I don't see a stop share.
I just did it for you, Tyler.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Paula.
All right, so this morning I just wanted to highlight a few things. One, we have outlined every single program person that may be able to assist you as you apply for funds. And I'm going to put that in the chat box, but it's important that as we open the application today, you know exactly who to contact depending on what your question is. So to everyone, I've just sent, this will also be on the CARES Act webpage, but if you have a finance related question, so trying to figure out which fund code to use or how to complete the budget page, you'll want to contact Tyler. If you have specific COVID-19 flexible funding questions or anything to do with programming, you'll want to contact me. If you have questions about ESEA federal programs, maybe you want to spend some of your money under that category, you'll want to contact Shelley Chassis-Jeanreau, the acting ESEA director. If you have questions about equitable shares and equitable services, that notice went out last week. Commissioner Macon has made the decision about how the state will move forward. And the decision, for those of you that may not have seen that notice, is that we will follow the law. So statute is very clear about how to provide equitable services and create equitable shares. And that is exactly what Maine will do. If you have questions, though, about the allocation table, Jackie Godbout, our Title I consultant, did that work and can answer your questions directly. If you have questions about special services, maybe you'd like to spend money in that category and you want to be sure that you're not negatively impacting maintenance of effort, Barbara McGowan is the woman that you want to email. Last week, we had her highlight and talk about what is maintenance of effort for special education. And she at that time said she would love to work with anyone that needs some additional support. Whether or not you've been in the role for 2 years or 20, either way, she's here for you. If you have questions about adult education, this morning I received an email from someone saying, our adult education director has reached out. There are some clear needs. Can I meet those needs with this funding? Absolutely, it's an allowable program. If you have questions, though, about the need or about adult ed, Gail Sinise will be the woman that you'll want to contact. If you decide to support Perkins or CTE programs, Donna Tyner will be the person you'll want to talk to, and then McKinney-Vento is Amelia Lyons. Now, a week ago or so, we talked about who should be leading this work, and the answer I provided then remains the same: the person with the capacity and the knowledge to do the work really well. So if you have decided to have your ESEA director lead the work, their login credentials will work now, and you'll be able to get into the application. If you've decided to have a different leader at your district or school level, you will need to email Gary Seekins from GEM. He is the administrator that created the application for the department, and he'll be able to create a login credentials. About a dozen of you have emailed me over the past 5 or 6 days, and those requests have been honored, and Gary will be reaching out today to provide you with your new login credentials for those of you that will be new to this work. So I'm sharing the contacts up front for a specific purpose. We have created the application portal in such a way that if you have put money into one of the buckets for a already existing federal program, your submission will be sent to that program leader, where they'll be reading it and they'll be looking at the eligibility. So that's why I want to be sure that you know to reach out to them with any questions. If you've put all of your money into COVID-19 other, the many categories that are available to you, you will have me, JC Holmes, our federal liaison, Jessica Nixon, our chief of staff, and Karen Kuziak, our legislative director, reviewing your submission for approval, which is why those questions should flow to me, and we'll make sure that we get your answers. But we are excited to say that later today, of course, we'll have a newsroom update sharing that the application portal is live, and we hope to begin receiving and reviewing your submissions later this week. Now, I promised a reporting update, and I wanted to talk about it today, given you're about to look at the application, if you haven't already, and that application does not yet have a performance report. So in full transparency, Maine was one of the first states to receive our grant award notification for ESSERF. And the moment we receive that, we always think about reporting, right? So great, we have the money, but what are you going to require of us in the future? So you may know that our first report to the feds is coming up very quickly, our 60-day report. We reached out to our program contact and asked, could you send the template to us so that we can begin that first report? Unfortunately, the template is not available. So the US Department of Education is currently building the template. So you don't see a performance report, but what you do need to know is that we will be using the GEM system to meet all reporting requirements. So the CARES Act was written in a way that it requires quarterly reports for ESSERF funds. So what that will look like on the DOE side is that you have the 12 allowable ESSERF expenditures that have been broken down into the 14 cost categories that Tyler discussed a few moments ago and more in depth yesterday. And then once you apply for the funding, all of the data that you fed into that application will be included in our first report back to the federal government. And so we will obviously have to report out on what you budgeted your funding on specifically, subsequent cash draws within the GEM system, and if there are additional requirements, once we do get the template from the federal government, we will inform you of that immediately. But the items I just talked about, we know will be required, and they also align with our current FAFATA reporting. So if you've been dealing with federal programs all along, none of this will be new or overwhelming. It's something you're used to. But if you're new to federal programs, please reach out with any questions so that we can support you through this process. So that is my quick update. I'm going to pause for questions specific to reporting or program support. Okay, so that was a solid 7 seconds. So I'm going to, will the performance report for ESSERF include goals or just expenditures? We suspect it'll look just like a typical performance report. So both the goals and the expenditures. But because the federal government has not provided us with a template that is required, I cannot say that with good, strong authority that that is in fact what will be required, but we suspect it will look very similar. Dawn, I didn't see a project description on the private school page. Where can we put that? We will talk through the application when it is officially released tomorrow and Thursday. So we'll take specific questions tomorrow on that piece. And then a private message. I haven't received my logins. If you emailed me last week, you should follow up with the GEM administrator if you don't receive your login and password by the end of the day. I spoke to Gary this morning and he said that is his priority today now that the application is out there in the world. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues, Beth Lambert and Paige Nichols. They are leading the work for connectivity under the GEAR grant, so the Governor's Education Emergency Relief. And there were several questions that were specific to some districts, but others that were more general terms. And so they will answer some of those questions and share an update with you.
Thank you, Chelsea. So I've only been on a handful of these calls, so I don't know specifically to the GEAR funding and this project what's been discussed, but I'm going to give a quick overview of our process. I will stick my email in the chat if there are questions that are specific to your district. I'll ask that you just reach out to me or to Beth about those, and then if there are general questions kind of at the end of the overview, we can hopefully answer some of those here. So in March, when this all first started, we identified a need for connectivity to be the priority, given that broadband is not universally available in our state. We have since then issued 4 rounds of surveys. The initial survey was just to superintendents, and the subsequent 3 went to building principals, superintendents, and technology directors. We have so far fulfilled the needs that were identified through the first 3 rounds of the survey. And the reason we had to close the various surveys is because at some point, working with procurement specialists, we had to place an order for equipment. And a challenge for us has been that inventory is flying out of warehouses. So when it became available, we had to jump on the opportunities. As we placed our first round of orders at the end of April, mid-April, we reopened the survey because we had, at that point, had 75% of Maine schools reporting. In an effort to meet 100% of the need, we reopened the survey, and that closed on May 8th. It was open for 2 weeks. Right now, we are working on placing orders to meet the needs identified in that survey, and we hope to do that in the next few weeks. I think that was sort of the broad overview. I know there have been some questions specific to budgeting ESSER funding for technology, and that folks are wondering if their school or a school in their district has not had an opportunity to fill out the survey yet, will there be an opportunity? And at this point, obviously the GEAR funding is a finite amount. We will place our orders to respond to the 4th round of the survey, and look at what funding is still available to place additional orders. That said, this continues to be a priority. We responded to a need, but we recognize that this is a need beyond just the current emergency we're faced with. So when the GEAR funding runs out, we will continue to look for other sources of funding to help meet the needs to reduce barriers to remote education for all Maine students. Beth, did I miss anything big that we talked about?
No, I think that covers the points we were trying to get.
So that's our overview. I'm hoping that kind of went in the direction that folks were hoping. I'm seeing some questions in the chat. And so I will try to take some of those, and Beth, maybe you can as well. A question about teachers that do not have broadband. The priority was to connect students to remote learning, and we've left it up to individual districts to decide how to best use the service contracts and equipment to meet that need. So it would be up to districts to issue them to teachers if there are teachers that needed that service contract as well to continue remote learning for their students. For equitable services, are these limited to the schools that have normally taken?
I think that was for Chelsea.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other question is around if they have not answered the survey yet, and it's closed, who should they contact to get information to us? So contact me and Beth, or me or Beth, and we are generating a list. We know of the schools, given what the data we've collected. We know which schools have not had a chance to fill out any of our surveys, but we'll be collecting that information. So if and when we can go back out for another round of orders, we will be reaching out to those folks directly. Other general questions? So both Beth and I put our emails in the chat. So if there are questions specific to your district, please reach out to us and we'll do our best to answer those for you.
Okay, thank you, Beth and Paige. So we did, Chelsea, we did have a question earlier, and I just to be able to take it as a note, because I don't know that we have an answer at this point in time. Have we heard anything about the executive order being extended to pay folks after June 30th? I think the executive order stated schools would pay staff through the end of the year. But I don't know about after June 30th. So I know I haven't heard anything in particular, but I don't know if that's something we might, might be something that yourself or JC can follow up on.
Absolutely, we're happy to follow up on it, but we don't have anything that we're able to share at this point in time.
Yep.
We do want to highlight, though, I've put in the chat box the CARES Act webpage. All of the questions that we have answers to that have been collected during our time together for office hours have been added to the CARES Act webpage. So that may be helpful for some of you. There are the first and second round of questions that we needed to send to USED have not come back to us. So the questions are still out there. We've checked up on them, and USED is still working on them.
And so I do want to note, Keith had asked a question, and Keith, Chelsea had typed the answer into the chat in case you didn't see it around your question on equitable services.
And I responded to that
Yep.
in the chat box. So
Right.
that information will be in the application.
Yep. Is JC on the call? There's a question around any word on the HEROES Act or the SMART bill. I know that's something that she had been following.
It'll now be in the Senate, and so it'll be discussed again throughout the week in the Senate.
Okay. Yep, because I do know there are two separate bills that addressing similar but different issues. So Dawn is noting she tried to send an email to support@gemschoolsoftwaredevelopment.com, but it is being returned as a not valid email address.
So I just saw that, and that was the email address that Gary provided this morning. So I also just sent an email to that address. And my Wi-Fi, because we're on this, is a little delayed. So in one moment, I'll know if it's working, and if not, we'll get a new one from Gary.
Okay. And then, do you know if there has been any decision to have the school budgets go directly from the school board approval to BVR without a district budget meeting? DWM and MSMA, we're working on this. So Michelle, we'll actually talk about that more tomorrow. We're gonna have Vicky here tomorrow, and then so we can discuss that in more detail tomorrow as well. And Melissa's asking, you may not be able to answer this yet, but can we anticipate the summer school guidance to be similar to the fall to help us planning for needs? I'm not sure what that is in relation to, Melissa. Is that into the guidance on how to operate, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Just looking at staffing, the 10
Yeah.
to 1, preferably 10 to 2. I guess I'm just curious to get a gauge on, is this what we might be looking at for the fall? So when we're planning for this application, so we can start anticipating what we might need.
Okay.
So this is a priority for the Commissioner's Office this week, and we hope to have more information in office hours later in the week.
Okay, thank you.
So a email or a message from Rachel saying her superintendent login for GEM is not working. Is it different login credentials? That may just be a permissions for that particular, for this application. So once we get the email for Gary and straightened out, that would be an email for Gary. And so Rachel's asking, is there an estimate about when summer school guidance will be released? And so I'll what Chelsea just said, where that is a priority for the Commissioner's Office this week. We will have it out as soon as we can.
Tyler?
Yep.
I just tried my login and I got a response back from GEM Software saying that if you are not normally the person who does the application, that your login won't work.
Okay. So then that would then be an email to Chelsea just provided a new email to support@gemschoolsoftware.com. So email them and they can redo the permissions or update the permissions for your access. So Lori's asking, is GEM the same place that we request all the other federal grant money? And so yes, it is. That's the 4pcamaine.org. So that's the same location as the ESEA funding, as the local entitlement funding, and the Perkins funding.
And if you are not the ESEA director, you will need to email support@gemsoftware.com.
Okay. So, and continue to put chat comments in there. And then I do want to mention, so as it's been brought up a couple of times around that school guidance, the guidance for schools, one of the groups that we want to hear from is the business managers as well. And so for those business managers that are on this call right now, so in the same light that we looked at, what are some different things that you're thinking about as challenges, and how to overcome those challenges. If you email me your comment so that I can add your voice to the document, that would, so essentially email me if you have some thoughts about how is this going to work, what are the challenges, how is your school district looking at overcoming those challenges, and especially think about it in your frame of mind as a business manager. What challenges are you going to see, and how your office operates, the operation of the school. Think of those departments that you oversee. And so just in case, I think basically everybody has my email, but just in case, I will throw mine into the chat box as well. And so there is a fairly tight deadline on that. If you could email me either preferably by the end of today, but early tomorrow morning, then I can capture those comments and provide those to the commissioner's office, so that we can get that guidance out as quickly as possible.
Chelsea, can I ask a quick question? I haven't looked at the application because my login isn't working, but are the allocations listed in the application that we have access to now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome. And later this afternoon, we'll have a newsroom article that will go out. It will highlight the allocation spreadsheet, and it'll also give a consolidated equitable shares portion. What it will not do is name each of the eligible private schools. So you would need to log in to get that information. It'll only have those two larger amounts available on the CARES Act webpage.
Great, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Can I just ask for one? I think that you've answered this question, but so I opened up the CARES Act application, and it shows the allocation at the top for our RSU. So those are the funds that we will have accessible to work with for the CARES Act. Am I correct in that?
Yes, so the application portal, the ESEA team spent a few days after Commissioner Macon made her announcement about equitable shares, and they updated the application portal. So what you're seeing there is your allocation. We will send out the allocation spreadsheet via the newsroom later today so that you can make the comparison, as you always have. And if you have any issues, you'll just have to reach out to us and we can address them right away. We will, of course, put this in the newsroom, and I know not everyone gets the newsroom updates. So we'll also send out that same message through GEM to anyone that works in federal programs. So you'll have ESEA folks, Perkins, IDEA, all of you will get that information. And if you don't have it by 6 o'clock tonight, please email me and we'll make sure you get the information you need. Because of course, once it goes in the newsroom, you'll have folks from your community calling and asking questions. So we want to make sure you're fully equipped to support them and answer those questions.
So we did have a question in the comments or in the chat box around. So I had a private message that asked about a particular position, and so where it won't impact MOE, would that be a good use of funds? And so that, you know, and so I think that's what I'm going to say is that's a very local decision as to how, you know, like how best do you think that you can support your school district with these funds, where it won't impact your MOE. That may make it a little bit easier to use those funds in that way. But as somebody else is actually asking about, our salary is going to be subject to the additional employee health and benefits percentages for federal funds, and the answer is yes. So these are federal funds. So the same additional costs that you would pay for other federal funds on your employees, any employees paid with these funds would be subject to those same percentages. So I don't know if you answered. I believe you spoke about this in the beginning, Chelsea. Will an email go out to the when the application is released? And what I want to say is that you had said that would be going out tomorrow.
Well, so that the formal, we're trying to give you some time, right?
Yep.
So the formal DOE newsroom announcement is going to go out today. We want to give you some time to be able to get in there, log in, ask us any questions. This is us trying to give you some breathing room, right, to prepare and to talk with either your superintendent or anyone else that's going to be in this work. We will put it out in the newsroom, it'll be out in the world, and then you'll probably wake up tomorrow morning to many, many emails asking you questions about it. And that's why we're timing it like we are. So by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, you can start bringing a lot of those questions you received this evening, and we can support you through that. The other question that I have a private message with, so should we begin consultation if we have time today? And so I think what that question is asking, the district that knows they have an eligible approved private that will receive equitable shares, should they begin the consultation process? If you have time to begin today, absolutely, right? Getting in writing that request to set up a time to meet with them and committing to that date right away is absolutely something you should do if you have time today. That's the other thing to keep in mind, right? Tomorrow morning, if they haven't heard from you, they will probably also reach out. So I don't think there's any harm in starting that communication this morning.
So Keith is asking if there'll be a similar place within the application to send out the email for communication for equitable services.
This is Jackie, and I do not believe, no, there is not. You have to do it on your own. We did not build that into the system.
So it wasn't built into the system because we wanted to build the system and get it out to you as quickly as possible. So when you send that email today, you'll want to save that as a part of your documentation for engaging in the initial steps of the consultation process.
Okay, so I'll give it just 30 more seconds. If people have additional questions, please type those into the chat. Okay, so with no additional questions coming in, I'm going to stop the recording.